Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS preview for this week's RSM Classic. I'll be heading up there for the weekend, out there for Friday through Sunday. Excited for that, and really to cap off our fall swing here with a bang to end out the season. So here in this video, going to cover what to expect from the tournament this week, both from the course perspective, where we have the plantation and seaside courses in rotation, and of course from the DFS angle, where we're going to look at some of my top plays on the slate. So we'll look at some of our plays at the top, some mid-tier plays, also a value player or two to give you an idea of some of the guys I'm getting to for exposure, and more importantly, the type of thought process I'm using for this sort of slate. So looking forward to it. Like I said, let's end this fall swing with a bang. Let's start it off with a look at the golf courses of the week. We've got two courses in rotation, but to simplify things a little bit, just going to have one consolidated model. So they're both very similar in terms of length, also in terms of the types of shots that you're going to face at both venues, and especially because the seaside is being used for 3 of the 4 rounds, right? That's the one we want to focus on a little bit more. But no matter whether you're at plantation or seaside, neither course is demanding when it comes to length. You're going to have plenty to mid to short irons in hand, and on top of that, it's the same in terms of agronomy. I mean, the golf courses are literally side by side, so there's not much of a difference when it comes to the weather. In terms of the protection, the seaside course might be a little bit more exposed to the wind than what you have out there in the plantation. Plantation course is also a little bit more inland than what you have with the seaside, but outside of that, not much differentiates the two golf courses. So if you're playing Showdown, plantation typically plays easier out of the two golf courses, especially if there's going to be a little bit of wind out there. But both of them, Bermuda grass from tip to toe, relatively short when it comes to the length. So you're going to be looking at the wedges more than anything. And then, like I mentioned, you have a little bit of reliance on course history. This event, for whatever reason, you see a lot of the same types of players popping up on the leaderboard year after year. And while you don't have a bunch of repeat champions, they're all that same type of player, right? A guy that maybe isn't known for being a bomber off the tee. You see a lot of the shorter hitters find success at the RSM Classic, and on top of that, you find a lot of really good wedge players finding themselves towards the top of the leaderboard. So when we're looking at the modeling this week, it shouldn't be a surprise, right, that we're focusing on the wedge ranges a little bit more, right, than we would be for most weeks out there. Bermuda grass putting, and then off the tee, it's much more about your driving accuracy around Sea Island than anything else. It's a short track, like I mentioned before, but on top of that, you have a lot of nasty hazards out there, a lot of marsh areas that are automatic drops. You have a few OBs to worry about there on the plantation course. So if you're going to focus on anything when it comes to the off the tee play, it's most likely the driving accuracy, good drive side of things. Outside of the main stats, I've got Bermuda grass around the green on there. Birdie or better percentage, you do see a winner around 19 under par, winning this for most years. But in terms of comps, right, not that much reliance there. I mean, you got Port Royal, a very similar type of golf course that you had last week. Harbour Town, the Sony Open, that I think are decent comp courses to look at, but most tracks aren't this short, right? You've got a rotation this week, so it's tough to really give you comp courses to a collection of golf courses like we have there. So they're into modeling, I think 5 to about 7% modeling weight on all 3 of them out there, but mostly looking at the wedges and the putting like I mentioned before. So with that being said, who are my core plays for this week? And in terms of my outright bets, I'm going a little bit further down the board. So for DFS purposes, there are going to be guys in this upper 9K, 10K range that I'm getting exposure to. Where I think a lot of the value is going to be this week is here at this 8, 9, and even the 7K range. We're going to find all 4 of these core plays. So it's going to be starting a little bit further down the board than what we're used to, but it's for good reason. This is the type of golf tournament where you see 40, 50, sometimes even 100 to 1 plus type of winners, and you want to embrace that, right? A lot of these top end guys like a Brian Harman, Corey Connors, you could throw into the bucket too. JT Poston hasn't played all that much. We're coming out a little bit rusty, right? Especially like Corey Connors, who we haven't really seen during the fall swing. Brian Harman's only played like, I believe, once over this entire fall swing. Let's see for Brian Harman. No, he has no starts over that swing. Same thing with Corey Connors. But then you have guys like Cam Young, who's only played once, right? JT Poston, he's only played once over that stretch there. Siwoo Kim, who's only played 1 golf tournament. And I'm worried they're going to be a little bit rusty out there. So the guys I'm focusing on are people that have actually been teeing it up, at least for the most part. We do have Brendan Todd, who we'll talk about here, that maybe doesn't have the most starts, but Eric Cole's been playing often, has been playing well when when he's been teeing it up. So if we take a look at the recent form, you have a T2 finish, T3 finish, T35 his last 3 starts. Of course, the 2 top 3 finishes speak for themselves out there, but this golf course is arguably a better fit than what you had out there at the Zozo, than what you had out there at the Shriners Children's Open. And while the Shriners did have Bermuda grass around the green, right, you do have bent grass greens. He's very familiar with the Bermuda grass, which you'll have from tip to toe this week because he's from South Florida. And I know we're up there in South Georgia, so it's a little bit different when it comes to the agronomy, right? It's not going to be picture perfect similarities across the board, but he's pretty used to playing at this part of the country. And when you take a look at some of the early top finishes for Eric Cole, almost all of them came on Bermuda. And now of late, now he's turned into really just a stud on tour at this point. Right now he's posting those top 3 finishes at courses that don't really fit his game, right? Shriners, you did have that one little patch Bermuda, but mostly was bent grass out there. Zozo Championship all the way over there in Japan. You had, I think, Zoysia grass as the main surface for that week. Now he's getting it done across the board, in a weak field event on a track that fits him even better when it comes to the stats and his baseline, right? Maybe it's a win this time around, right? Rather than that top 3 finish. So I fully thought Eric Cole might be your 3rd, maybe 4th most expensive player in this field. And he's down there at number 10 in pricing. So in DFS, I think he's an even better play than some of the outright markets, which I took him outright, I believe, at 30 to 1. I've took him in the top 10, top 20 markets too. You're not getting a huge amount of juice, right? Especially with that top 20 bet with an Eric Cole, but still something I thought was worth investing in because I think he's just criminally mispriced, right? In terms of the outright market, I think he should be closer to like 20 to 1, maybe even like 18 to 1, like some of these other top end players. And I know he doesn't have the tour victory to tout about, but if you're talking about recent form, right, he's number 1 in my modeling. He's number 2 in form behind Aberg over that stretch. And I'm not saying he's a better play than Aberg, right? He should probably be at the top of the betting board, but I think there's at least a conversation that Eric Cole is a part of that conversation, right? He's a part of that elite tier group based on the stats, based on the modeling, based on the fact that he likes Bermuda, is very comfortable on it. I just don't understand it, the outright number or the DFS price. So he's undoubtedly going to get some attention. He might even be your most popular player this week, but one player doesn't determine the ownership for your lineup, right? Does not determine your entire lineup build out there by taking one player. If you're going to use an Eric Cole, potentially even as your first man in, I think that's a way to get different, right? Maybe you make him the first player that you're taking rather than as the second man in, as many others in the field are going to. But on top of that, even if he is 30% owned, and honestly, that's kind of what I'm expecting for Eric Cole early in the week, you can differentiate elsewhere, right? You take somebody in the 8K range that's sub 5% owned. That helps you out, right? Maybe just to make sure you're getting different, right? You force in somebody that's going to be sub 1.5, maybe sub 2% owned down there in the 7K range, and then you're just fine, right? When it comes to your differentiation. So single entries, cash lineups, right? I wouldn't worry about that whatsoever. I think Eric Cole is one of the must plays in those kind of formats, but even in large field GPPs, I think you can get away with it too. So definitely chalky, but a play that I think is just being disrespected when it comes to the pricing across the board. Next up, we've got the one player here that really doesn't have a lot of recent form. I guess you could say the same thing about Chris Kirk, but he's at least played a little bit over this fall stretch. Brendan Todd, right, has the one start, right, has not teed it up really at all other than last week. This came over from Bermuda after a top 20 finish, and that was after being in the top 3-5 of the pricing, right? He was, for the entire week, whether it was outright odds, matchup odds, DFS pricing, right? He was getting a lot of respect at a golf tournament that he's won before in a similar type of track, right? Similar type of golf course, right? It was our number one comp course was Port Royal Golf Club. He's won at the Mayakoba Championship, a track that I find very similar to what you're going to get this week. He's also won at a few other shorter tracks before that all fit the same kind of wedge and putting kind of build. So for him to be down here at $8,500, first off, I think he's too cheap. But second off, I don't hear him being talked about on a lot of shows this week. Is a huge mistake, right? He's one of those players that fits the mold at this type of track in the event history, though it hasn't necessarily converted into really good finishes, right? 2 missed cuts the last time out. He did have a top 4 finish out there 4 years ago, so he at least has that to tout out there. So in large field GPPs, right, if you need to get a little bit different in the 8K range, I'm not saying that Brendan Todd's going to be your lowest owned player here, right? He's not even going to be close, right, to the lowest owned player down here in the 8K range. But if you're looking for a player that really at that salary, right, is projecting well, that has that top 10, top 5 upside, then Brendan Todd is your guy. So once again, just like Eric Cole, another player that I took outright, but even more intriguing to me is out there for the top 10, top 20 markets, right? At these sort of golf tournaments, right, Brendan Todd not really known for a ton of winning upside, right? He's done it, especially like 2-3 years ago, right, was winning golf tournaments. Of late, has been a little bit more consistent, right? Has been going out there, making a bunch of cuts, grinding out 65, 70% made cut rate. That's what I want to lean into here, right? And for DFS purposes, maybe a little bit of a better play for single entries, smaller field sort of tournaments, but I do think has enough top end upside to warrant taking him in GPPs, right? He's not maybe not my favorite play when it comes to the top end upside perspective. That's why I did take so much exposure for the top 10s, top 20s, rather than the outright market, but still a player I want to get exposure to. And speaking of, the reason why I'm getting so much more outright exposure now is now Hard Rock Bet, the Seminole tribe down here in Florida has legalized sports betting, right? Got that passed through the Florida legislation and all that sort of fun stuff. And now go out there and legally bet on sports down here in Florida. So going to be a bigger part of my process. Probably going to start doing a lot more content catering towards that too. But pretty sweet, right? Especially when able to go out there and sweat out some bets, at least on the legal side down here in Florida. All right, next up in terms of our core plays is going to be Chris Kirk, a player that has found a ton of success around this track. In fact, his first ever tour win was at the RSM Classic. Of course, he was able to go out there and win the Honda last year, but before that, it was the RSM, right? It was kind of what rejuvenated his career. He has really talked about how this event is one of his favorite to get to every single year. So the fact that he's $7,900, and I know he missed the cut and is only starting the fall, that's probably why he's only $7,900, and that's also why he's not getting any respect this week. And for somebody like myself, right, that's going to take a chalky player like an Eric Cole in plenty of my lineups, probably at least half of them, right? I'm going to take them in a good majority of my lineups this week, right? I'm going to have to force in a player that's a little bit different like a Chris Kirk, and what better guy to get to, even in sketchy form, right? Not the best, even if you zoom out a little bit, right? The form isn't all that great for Chris Kirk, but what better player to take a shot on than somebody that's really good with the mid to short irons, is pretty accurate off the tee, and has killed it in terms of track record out there. Chris Kirk is, in my mind, one of the better shots in the dark that you can take. So at $7,900, I think the price tag is more than fair. The ownership, at least early in the week, is looking to be in check, kind of like what we had with Brendan Todd. So you're not going to be getting a ton of differentiation here, right? They're going to be a spot where you're getting a little bit different to the field, I would say, in most GPPs. It's still a solid spot in terms of projection. So he could easily be your third, maybe even fourth man into lineups. And at this sort of golf course, has winning upside. So right, like the first two core plays, is another guy that took for the outright perspective, but kind of like a Brendan Todd, I also like the fact that he has that consistency, right? You know, does post top 10s, top 5s from time to time. So went out there, took a bet for the top 10 and the top 20 market, as a lot of the value that I was getting on Hard Rock was pretty comparable, or if not better, to a lot of the sentiment out there in the industry. So a lot of my exposure, of course, because I'm only limited to one legal book down here, is going to come down to the kind of lines that I can get. But there on Brendan Todd, there on Chris Kirk, pretty decent odds out there to take advantage of. So I went with those two. And again, with the course history, with the correlation between some of the comp courses that I'm looking at this week, a lot of bright spots when it comes to our top 3 plays. And our last guy we're getting to, down here at $7,500, so it'll be 4 plays for this video, is Ben Griffin. And he was my first click this week because at $7,500, and especially from like the top 20 market, top 10 markets out there, I thought it was just getting no respect for, first off, how he played here last year. So if we take a look at the event history, you'll see what I'm talking about. $7,500. What was it? A T29 finish, was really in contention through the first 3 days though. Didn't have the best Sunday, kind of fell off a little bit, but kind of like the Wyndham Championship, right? Showed a lot of promise. And at short Bermuda tracks, he's gone out there and had his best performances, right? I mean, nearly won the Wyndham last year. A few other shorter tracks of late has gone out there, had those top 10 finishes. And really where you see him pop, right, go out there and get you that GPP viable sort of performance are at these short Bermuda tracks, right? He fits the mold, right? He's the shorter player off the tee, not the best off the tee player, but really, really good with the short irons. He's a pretty decent putter from time to time, right? On Bermuda is his best self. You can see he's a whole 0.64 shots better on Bermuda than what he's been doing of late. And if we take a look at how he's been playing over the last 36 rounds, you'll see why the modeling's fallen off a little bit, right? The putting gaining 0.3 shots per round. The approach play, right? He's still gaining, but not that 0.5, 0.7 shots per round that you see from Ben Griffin from time to time. So he's been off a little bit, right? Off the tee is never really going to gain, so that's actually pretty typical for Ben Griffin. But he's been a little bit off with his approach play and putting, but it's not like it was so off that he's losing, right? Or that he's a neutral player to the field. He's still better than your average tour player out there. So if we're getting him at his low point right here, and he's still, a pretty decent play when it comes to the numbers. Imagine him when he's firing in all cylinders, right? When you get him back on Bermuda, something that he's very comfortable at, right? I know it was his first ever start at Sea Island. He's from the island, okay? That's a narrative you're probably going to hear a lot of people talk about this week. That's an afterthought, right? For me going out there and playing Ben Griffin. But to me, that's a huge plus, right? Somebody that's played this golf course a lot. I believe his home base is out there full time at Sea Island now, right? When he's not out there on tour, which I think is a huge plus for him, right? He grew up elsewhere, but still having the familiarity, right? Having probably played Sea Island Golf Club like 1,000 times at this point. I'm not huge on the narrative thing, as a lot of other people might be when it comes to making their bets. I think it's helpful. It's a little cherry on top for sure. But in terms of the modeling, in terms of the comp courses, the Bermuda stats, we're looking at the wedges, so on and so forth, checks pretty much every box we're looking for. So yeah, my first click this week was him for a top 10 finish. Loved the value on that over there on Hard Rock Bet. But in general, just a player that I think is going to go out there, at least get his name into the hat. Outright bets on him, I didn't have the best value over there on Hard Rock Bet, so I didn't take him from the outright perspective. But for GPPs, right, DFS, I think he has even more intrigue from that perspective. He's, maybe even your fifth man in laps, maybe your fourth man in, if you're being a little bit more aggressive with your salary up top. And he fits that mold perfectly. Has just the right amount of upside to go out there at that sort of price tag and potentially win you a GPP this week. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS preview this week. Like I said, I might be going up there for the golf tournament. Haven't 100% cemented it at this point, but thinking I'll be there for Friday through Sunday. So if so, keep an eye out for some updates out there on the social media platforms for any of the in-course boots on the ground action. So looking forward to it. Should be a fun week out there. I know it's our last hoorah here during the fall swing, so let's make it count, right? Let's go out there, find our names towards the top of some of those GPPs, and hopefully go out there and end a year with a bang. I appreciate the support in the channel. Smash that like button on the way out of here, guys. Also, comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. And if you end up getting the winner with your comment, you're going to get a free month of my Patreon page. On there, of course, is where you can get access to all the different projections that you see throughout the video. That includes my player pool, projected ownership, all the different modeling notes that you see me using and referencing throughout my videos, and all the different prop content that I'm posting too. So if you want a free chance at the Patreon page, go ahead, put your winner down in the comments. And on top of that, go ahead and just join the page if you want immediate access to begin with. Pricing isn't crazy. It's very reasonable compared to other tout sites out there. And I do, first off, I do all this for golf, but also cover everything for the football side as well. For showdown, main slates, props on that side. So a little bit of something for everybody out there. Looking forward to it, guys. Again, I appreciate all the support here on the channel. Let's go out there and have ourselves a week.